The storm had turned Highway 89 into a frozen graveyard. Snow fell in relentless sheets, burying everything beneath a suffocating white silence. Officer Jake Morrison gripped the steering wheel of his patrol SUV, his knuckles white beneath his gloves. Beside him, his K9 partner, Ranger, a 95-pound Belgian Malinois with intelligent amber eyes and a coat the color of autumn leaves, sat rigid in the passenger seat. His ears twitched with every gust of wind that rocked the vehicle. Jake was 36, a former Army Ranger who'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan before trading his combat boots for a badge in the small mountain town of Pine Ridge, Colorado. His face carried the weathered look of a man who'd seen too much darkness, his jaw perpetually set in quiet determination. Dark blonde hair, cropped military short, framed storm gray eyes that rarely missed a detail. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. A thin scar traced from his left temple to his cheekbone, a permanent reminder of an IED explosion that had taken 3 of his brothers in arms. He'd come to Pine Ridge seeking peace. What he found instead was purpose. The radio crackled. All units, be advised. Highway 89 is officially closed due to whiteout conditions. Repeat, Highway 89 is closed. No civilian traffic permitted. Jake reached for the mic. Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I'm making one final sweep of the northern pass before I head back. Over. A pause. Then, the voice of Sergeant Carol Stevens, a 28-year veteran with a grandmother's warmth and a drill sergeant's discipline. Copy that, Morrison, but make it quick. This storm's not playing games tonight. We've already lost power in 3 sectors. Understood. Unit 7, out. He glanced at Ranger, who was now standing on the seat, nose pressed against the window, breath fogging the glass. The dog's body language had changed, tense, alert. Every muscle coiled like a spring, ready to release. What is it, boy? Jake asked, his voice low and calm. The tone he'd learned in the Rangers, the one that steadied both man and beast under fire. Ranger let out a low whine, then a sharp bark. His paws scratched at the door. Jake's instincts kicked in. After 3 years working with this dog, he'd learned to trust Ranger's senses above his own. If the Malinois sensed something, there was something to find. He slowed the vehicle, squinting through the windshield. The wipers fought a losing battle against the accumulating snow. The headlights barely penetrated 10 feet ahead, swallowed by the white void. Then he saw it. A faint disturbance in the snow on the shoulder. Not the smooth drift of undisturbed powder, but something disrupted, uneven, recent. Jake pulled over, engaged the emergency brake, and flipped on his flashers. The red and blue lights strobed uselessly against the storm's fury. "Stay," he commanded, opening his door. The wind hit him like a physical blow, stealing his breath. Snow stung his exposed cheeks, instantly numbing his skin. He pulled his heavy parka tighter and he reached for his tactical flashlight, the beam cutting a narrow tunnel through the chaos. Ranger ignored the command, leaping past him into the storm. The dog's training kicked in immediately. Nose to the ground, circling, searching. "Ranger, heel!" Jake called, but his voice was torn away by the wind. The Malinois moved with purpose, following an invisible trail only he could detect. He stopped suddenly, 20 yards from the road, and began digging furiously, snow flying between his legs. Jake's heart rate spiked. He trudged through knee-deep drifts, each step a battle against the storm's resistance. When he reached Ranger's position, the dog had already uncovered something. A hand, small, pale, female. The fingers curled slightly, as if reaching for help that never came. "Jesus Christ," Jake breathed, dropping to his knees. He began digging with his gloved hands, clearing snow with desperate efficiency. Ranger worked beside him, both of them driven by the same primal urgency to uncover life before death claimed it. A face emerged, teenage, maybe 17, 18 at most. Her lips were blue, skin the color of ice. Dark hair plastered to her forehead, crusted with frost. Her eyes were closed, but Jake could see the faint flutter of her eyelids, alive. Barely. "Stay with me," he commanded, his voice cracking with an emotion he thought he'd buried years ago. He cleared more snow, revealing her body, and his breath caught in his throat. She was pregnant, heavily pregnant. Her swollen belly strained against a thin jacket that offered no protection against the elements. Her hands instinctively cradled her stomach, even in unconsciousness, the universal gesture of a mother protecting her child. Jake's training took over. He stripped off his parka and wrapped it around her, then keyed his radio with shaking fingers. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I have a Code 3 emergency. Female, approximately 17 years old, heavily pregnant, found buried in the snow at mile marker 47 on Highway 89. She's hypothermic and unresponsive. I need immediate medical assistance." Repeat. Immediate medical assistance. Static. Then Carol's voice, sharp with alarm. "Unit 7. Confirm. Did you say pregnant?" "Affirmative." "She's maybe 8, 9 months along?" "I don't know how long she's been out here, but she's barely breathing." "Jake, the nearest ambulance is 30 minutes out, and that's if they can even get through this storm. Can you transport?" He looked at the girl's face, at the faint tremor of her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. 30 minutes might as well be 30 hours. "Negative." "She won't last that long. I'm bringing her in myself. Have Dr. Ellen Reeves standing by at Pine Ridge Medical. Tell her it's critical." "Copy that." "Godspeed, Morrison." Jake scooped the girl into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, a fragile bundle of frozen life. Ranger led the way back to the SUV, barking sharply to clear a path through the drifts. Jake laid her gently across the back seat, cranking the heater to maximum. He stripped off his gloves and pressed 2 fingers against her neck, searching for a pulse. It was there, thready and weak, but present. Ranger jumped into the back, positioning himself beside the girl, his body heat a natural blanket. The dog's instincts understood what technology never could. Warmth meant survival. Jake threw the vehicle into drive and punched the accelerator. The tires spun, caught traction, and the SUV lurched forward into the storm. The drive to Pine Ridge Medical Center normally took 15 minutes. Tonight, Jake made it in 8. He drove like he'd driven in combat zones, focused and fearless, the road a battlefield where every second counted. The snow tried to bury them, the wind tried to push them off the road, but Jake Morrison had faced worse than weather. He'd faced death. And he'd learned that death only won when good men stopped fighting. The hospital's emergency entrance glowed like a beacon through the white chaos. Jake slammed on the brakes, the SUV fishtailing to a stop. He was out of the vehicle before it fully settled, pulling the girl from the back seat as the automatic doors hissed open. "Help! I need help." His voice echoed through the sterile corridor. "Doctor." Ellen Reeves appeared instantly, a woman in her early 50s with silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a tight bun and sharp blue eyes that had seen every manner of trauma. She wore navy scrubs under a white coat, a stethoscope draped around her neck like a badge of office. "Gurney!" she barked, and 2 nurses materialized with a stretcher. Jake laid the girl down, his arms suddenly empty and trembling. Ellen was already conducting her assessment, fingers moving with practiced precision. Core temperature is dangerously low, pulse is weak. "Get her to Trauma 2. Start warming protocols immediately. And page Dr. Chen from OB. We've got a pregnant minor in critical condition." The medical team moved like a well-orchestrated unit. The gurney racing down the corridor. Jake tried to follow, but Ellen placed a firm hand on his chest. "You did your part, Jake. Let us do ours." He nodded, watching until the doors swung closed, separating him from the girl whose name he didn't even know. Ranger pressed against his leg, whining softly. Jake looked down at his partner and dropped to one knee, wrapping his arms around the dog's muscular frame. "Good boy," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You saved her life, Ranger. You saved them both." The dog's tail thumped once against the floor, a modest acknowledgement of heroism. Jake stood, wiping his face with the back of his hand. His parka was still wrapped around the girl. He stood in the bright hospital corridor in his uniform shirt, soaked with melted snow, shivering from cold and adrenaline crash. A nurse approached, young and kind-faced, carrying a blanket. "Officer Morrison, you're freezing. Here." "I'm fine," he said automatically. "You're not," she insisted, draping the thermal blanket over his shoulders. "The girl is stable for now. Dr. Reeves will update you as soon as she can." Jake nodded, following her to a small waiting area. He collapsed into a plastic chair, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. Ranger curled at his feet, head resting on his paws, but his eyes remained open, watchful. Time moved strangely in hospital waiting rooms. Minutes stretched into eternities. Jake stared at the clock on the wall, watching the second hand crawl. 7 minutes, 12, 20. His mind replayed the scene. The hand reaching through the snow, the pregnant belly, the blue lips. How long had she been out there? Who was she? And more importantly, who had left her to die? Because someone had. People didn't end up buried in snowdrifts by accident. Someone had put her there. Someone had tried to kill her and the baby she carried. The thought ignited a familiar rage in Jake's chest, the same righteous fury he'd felt when insurgents targeted civilians, when bullies preyed on the weak, when evil wore a human face and grinned. The doors swung open. Dr. Ellen Reeves emerged, stripping off latex gloves. Her expression was carefully neutral, the mask of a physician who delivered both miracles and tragedies with equal professionalism. Jake stood. "How is she?" Ellen gestured for him to sit, taking the chair beside him. "She's alive, which is a miracle considering what her body's been through. Core temperature was 88 degrees when you brought her in. Another 10 minutes, and we'd be having a very different conversation." "And the baby?" Ellen's expression softened. Strong heartbeat. "We're monitoring closely, but right now, both mother and child are stable." Jake exhaled, relief flooding through him. "Thank God." "Thank your dog," Ellen said, glancing at Ranger. "And thank your instincts. Most people would have driven past that snowbank without a second thought. Can I see her?" Ellen hesitated. "She's still unconscious. Her body is shutting down non-essential functions to protect the baby and vital organs. It's a self-preservation response to hypothermia. She might not wake for several hours. I'll wait. Jake, I'll wait," he repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. Ellen studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Room 214. But only for a few minutes. She needs rest, and honestly, so do you." Jake followed her through the maze of corridors, Ranger padding silently beside him. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and industrial laundry detergent, sounds muffled by acoustic tiles and the constant hum of medical equipment. Room 214 was at the end of the hall, isolated from the main ward. Ellen opened the door quietly. The girl lay motionless in the bed, dwarfed by white sheets and medical equipment. IVs ran into both arms, a fetal monitor glowed beside the bed, displaying 2 heartbeats in synchronized rhythm, and warming blankets covered her from chest to feet. Her face had regained some color, no longer the deathly blue-white of hypothermia. She looked younger in the soft light, fragile and impossibly alone. Jake approached slowly, as if sudden movement might shatter the fragile peace. "What's her name?" Ellen glanced at the chart. "We don't know yet." She had no identification. No wallet, no phone, nothing. "We're running her prints through the system, but it'll take time." "She's just a kid," Jake murmured. 17, maybe 18, old enough to be pregnant, old enough to be someone's daughter. The words hung heavy in the air. Jake pulled a chair close to the bedside and sat, elbows resting on his knees. Ranger settled beside him, head resting on the bed rail, as if standing guard. "I'll have Carol run missing persons reports," Jake said. "Someone has to be looking for her." Ellen placed a hand on his shoulder. "Get some rest, Jake. I'll call you if anything changes." He nodded but made no move to leave. Ellen smiled sadly and left, closing the door with a soft click. Silence settled over the room, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the quiet hiss of the warming blanket's thermostat. Jake watched the girl's chest rise and fall, the gentle swell of her pregnant belly visible beneath the sheets. "Who are you?" he thought. "And who did this to you?" Hours passed. Jake dozed fitfully in the uncomfortable chair, waking every time a nurse checked vitals. Ranger never moved, his vigil unbroken. Dawn was breaking beyond the window, pale gray light filtering through the storm's remnants when the girl stirred. Jake snapped awake instantly, leaning forward. Her eyelids fluttered, mouth moving as if trying to form words. Her hand instinctively moved to her stomach, confirming what her unconscious mind already knew. "Easy," Jake said softly. "You're safe. You're in Pine Ridge Medical Center. You're going to be okay." Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused and confused. They were hazel, flecked with gold, and filled with terror that broke Jake's heart. She tried to sit up, panicking, and Jake gently restrained her. "You need to stay still. You've been through hell, but you're safe now. I promise." "My baby," she whispered, her voice hoarse and cracking. "Is my baby." "Your baby's fine," Jake assured her. "Strong heartbeat. The doctors are monitoring both of you. You're both going to be okay." Tears spilled down her cheeks, silent and devastating. Her hand pressed against her belly, and Jake saw the relief wash over her face. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She hesitated, fear flickering across her features. Her gaze darted to the door, then back to Jake, as if calculating whether to trust him. "You're safe," he repeated. "I'm Officer Jake Morrison. That's my partner, Ranger. He's the one who found you. You've been unconscious for almost 6 hours." She looked at the Malinois, who was watching her with those intelligent amber eyes. Something in her expression softened. "Emma," she whispered. "My name is Emma Clark." "Okay, Emma. Can you tell me what happened? How did you end up buried in the snow?" Fresh tears welled in her eyes, and her breathing quickened, panic rising. The fetal monitor's beeping accelerated. Jake immediately backed off. "It's okay. You don't have to talk about it now. Just rest." But Emma grabbed his wrist with surprising strength, her fingers digging into his skin. Her eyes were wide, desperate, filled with a terror that transcended physical pain. "He tried to kill me," she whispered. Jake's blood ran cold. "Who?" Emma's lips trembled. She looked at the door again, as if expecting someone to burst through at any moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible, a single name that carried the weight of betrayal and horror. Pastor Marcus Whitfield. The name hit Jake like a physical blow. Pastor Marcus Whitfield was Pine Ridge's spiritual leader, the head of the town's largest church. A man respected and beloved by thousands. He was mid-50s, charismatic, with silver hair, and a smile that could convince you of anything. He'd been featured on local news for his charity work, his community outreach, his dedication to helping troubled youth. And according to this 17-year-old pregnant girl, he'd tried to kill her. Jake's jaw clenched. His hand instinctively moved to his sidearm, muscle memory from too many deployments where threats came from trusted places. "Emma," he said carefully, keeping his voice calm despite the rage building in his chest. "Are you telling me Pastor Whitfield is the one who left you in the snow?" She nodded, tears streaming faster now. "He said no one would believe me, that I was just a troubled runaway, that I'd disappear and no one would even look." Her voice broke completely. "He said the storm would take care of his problem." "What problem?" Emma's hand moved to her belly, the answer obvious and heartbreaking. "Is he?" Jake couldn't finish the question. "The father," Emma whispered, shame coloring her features. "He said he'd help me, that he understood, that God had brought me to him for a reason." She laughed bitterly, the sound hollow and broken. "I was so stupid." "You weren't stupid," Jake said firmly. "You were a kid, and he was a predator." The door opened suddenly, and Dr. Ellen Reeves entered, followed by a younger woman Jake recognized as Sarah Chen, the hospital's OB-GYN specialist. Sarah was in her late 30s, petite with kind eyes and steady hands that had delivered half the babies born in Pine Ridge over the past decade. "Emma," Dr. Chen said warmly, approaching the bedside. "I'm Dr. Chen. How are you feeling?" "Tired," Emma admitted. "And scared." "That's completely understandable. You've been through a trauma. But I want you to know that both you and your baby are doing remarkably well, all things considered." She picked up the chart, reviewing notes. "You're approximately 37 weeks along, which means your baby could come any day now. We'll keep you here for observation. Make sure there are no complications from the hypothermia." Emma nodded weakly. Sarah glanced at Jake, a silent question in her eyes. He gave a small nod, indicating they needed to talk. "Emma, I'm going to step outside for just a moment," Jake said. "Ranger will stay with you. Is that okay?" Emma looked at the dog, who had remained perfectly still throughout the conversation, and nodded. "Okay." Jake followed the doctors into the hallway, closing the door behind them. The moment it clicked shut, his professional composure cracked. "She says Pastor Marcus Whitfield tried to kill her. That he's the father of her baby. And when she wouldn't. I don't know, comply with whatever sick plan he had. He drove her out into the storm and left her to die." Ellen's face went pale. "Pastor Whitfield? Jake, I know who he is," Jake interrupted. "And I know what he is now. A predator, a rapist, an attempted murderer." Sarah crossed her arms, her expression conflicted. "Those are serious allegations, Officer Morrison. Marcus Whitfield is one of the most respected men in this community. Half the hospital board attends his church. And that's exactly why he thought he could get away with it," Jake shot back. "That's how predators operate. They hide behind respectability, behind trust, behind God." Ellen held up a hand. "Jake's right. If Emma's telling the truth, and I have no reason to doubt a teenage girl who nearly died in a snowstorm, then we have a duty to protect her and investigate these claims." "We'll need evidence," Sarah said. "Practically. Medical examination, documentation, a statement from Emma when she's strong enough. And DNA," Jake added. "When that baby is born, we'll have definitive proof." Ellen nodded. "I'll have forensics conduct a rape kit. With her permission, of course. And Sarah, document everything. Every injury, every detail. This is going to trial, and we need an airtight case." "What about Emma's safety?" Sarah asked. "If Whitfield finds out she survived, he won't," Jake said, his voice hard as steel. "As of right now, Emma Clark doesn't exist. No visitors. No information released. I'm posting a guard outside this door, 24/7, and I'm listing her as Jane Doe in all official records until we can secure her safety." Ellen looked relieved. "I'll inform the staff. No one talks about this patient. Not to family, not to friends, not to anyone." Jake pulled out his phone, already dialing. "Carol, it's Morrison. I need you to pull everything we have on Pastor Marcus Whitfield. Traffic violations, property records, financial statements, everything. And do it quietly." "Jake, what's going on?" Carol's voice was wary. "I'll explain when I get there. Just trust me. This is big." He hung up and turned back to the doctors. "Keep Emma comfortable and safe. I'm going to end this." Ellen grabbed his arm. "Jake, be careful. If Whitfield really is what Emma says he is, he won't go down without a fight. Men like that have resources, power, connections." Jake's smile was cold and humorless. "So do I." He returned to Emma's room. The girl was crying quietly, Ranger's head resting on the bed beside her hand. The dog's presence clearly brought her comfort. "Emma," Jake said gently, pulling the chair close again, "I believe you. And I'm going to make sure Pastor Whitfield pays for what he did. But I need you to be brave just a little longer. Can you do that?" She nodded, wiping her eyes. "Tell me everything. From the beginning. How did you meet him?" Emma took a shaky breath. "I ran away from home 6 months ago. My stepdad. He was hurting me. I couldn't stay there anymore. I ended up in Pine Ridge, with nothing. No money, nowhere to go. And someone directed you to the church?" "A woman at the bus station." She said Pastor Whitfield helped kids like me. That he had a program for runaways. Emma's voice grew bitter. She didn't know what kind of help he offered. What happened when you got to the church? At first, it seemed perfect. He gave me food, a place to sleep in the church basement. He talked about God's love and redemption, about how I deserved better. She laughed hollowly. I thought he was a saint. When did things change? Emma's hands clenched the sheets. About a month in. He started asking me to stay late. To help him with special projects. He'd touch my shoulder, my hand. Nothing that seemed wrong at first, but then. She trailed off, unable to continue. Jake's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice gentle. You don't have to give me details right now. Just tell me when you found out you were pregnant. 3 months ago. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do, I thought. I thought he'd help me figure it out. Tears streamed down her face. He did. He figured out how to make me disappear. Did he say anything? When he left you in the snow? Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. He said God would forgive him, that sometimes sacrifice was necessary for the greater good, that my death would be a mercy for both me and the baby. She looked up at Jake, her hazel eyes burning with a fire that hadn't been there before. But I didn't die. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows what he is. Jake reached out and squeezed her hand. I promise you, Emma, justice is coming. A knock at the door interrupted them. A uniformed officer stepped in, young and eager, probably mid-20 seconds. Deputy Ryan Foster, fresh from the academy and still trying to prove himself. Officer Morrison, Sergeant Stevens sent me to relieve you. She said you've been here all night. Jake shook his head. I'm not leaving. Sir, she was pretty clear. Tell Carol I'm staying until I know Emma is protected. Whitfield doesn't know she's alive yet, but when he finds out, he'll come for her. I'm not letting that happen. Ryan straightened. Understood, sir. What do you need from me? Station yourself outside this door. No one enters except medical staff, and you verify their credentials before they cross that threshold. If Pastor Marcus Whitfield or anyone associated with his church tries to visit, you detain them and call me immediately. Yes, sir. As Ryan took his position in the hallway, Jake turned back to Emma. Get some rest. You're safe now. I promise. For the first time since she'd woken, Emma smiled. It was fragile and uncertain, but it was there. Jake left the room, Ranger at his heels, and pulled out his phone again. He had a monster to hunt, and unlike in Afghanistan, this monster wore a collar and smiled from behind a pulpit. Pine Ridge was going to learn that wolves in sheep's clothing still had teeth, and Jake Morrison knew exactly how to pull them. The Pine Ridge Police Department sat on the corner of Main and Cedar, a 2-story brick building that had served the community for 60 years. Inside, the station hummed with its usual early morning activity. Officers coming off night shifts, phones ringing, the smell of burnt coffee, and the faint scent of gun, oil from the armory. Jake pushed through the front doors, Ranger beside him. Heads turned. People had questions. Why was he soaking wet? Where had he been all night? But Jake's expression made it clear this wasn't the time. Sergeant Carol Stevens emerged from her office, a coffee mug in one hand and reading glasses perched on her nose. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more incredible true stories of courage and loyalty. She was short, barely 5'4", but she commanded respect through sheer competence and 30 years of experience that had seen everything from domestic disputes to the occasional murder. Morrison, my office, now. Jake followed her into the cramped space filled with filing cabinets, commendations on the walls, and photographs of Carol's grandchildren. She closed the door and gestured to the chair across from her desk. Sit, talk. Jake remained standing. I need everything on Pastor Marcus Whitfield. Bank records, property holdings, phone records for the past 6 months, and I need a warrant to search his residence and the church. Carol set down her mug slowly. You want to tell me why you're going after one of the most beloved men in Pine Ridge? Because he's a rapist and attempted murderer. The words hung in the air like a grenade, with the pin pulled. Carol's expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. "You better have evidence to back up that statement." Jake pulled out his phone, showing her photos he'd taken of Emma's medical chart with Dr. Reeves' permission. 17-year-old girl, 8 months pregnant, found buried alive in the snow during last night's storm. She identified Pastor Marcus Whitfield as the father of her child and the man who tried to kill her. Carol studied the images, her jaw tightening. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. He's been grooming runaway teens through his outreach program. Emma Clark ran away from an abusive home, ended up at his church, and he took advantage of her. When she got pregnant and became a liability, he drove her out into the storm and left her to die. Carol sat back, removing her glasses to rub her eyes. "You know what you're asking me to do here, Jake? Marcus Whitfield isn't just some random suspect. He's got connections. The mayor goes to his church. Half the city council. Judge Patterson." "I don't care if he's got connections to the Pope," Jake said, his voice steel. "That girl almost died. Her baby almost died. And if I hadn't found her when I did, Whitfield would have gotten away with murder. Can she testify?" "She already has. I recorded her statement with her permission, audio and video, and Dr. Reeves is conducting a rape kit as we speak. When the baby is born, we'll have DNA evidence." Carol nodded slowly, the gears turning. "Okay, here's what we do. I'll start pulling records, but quietly. No official warrants yet. We don't want to tip him off that we know Emma's alive. He probably thinks the storm buried his secret." "He does," Jake confirmed, "and I want to keep it that way until we have enough evidence to bring him in without any possibility of escape." "What about the girl? Is she safe?" "She's under protection at Pine Ridge Medical. Jane Doe for now. No visitors, no information released. Ryan Foster is stationed outside her door." "Good." Carol picked up her phone. "I'll have Tech run Whitfield's financials. If he's been paying off Emma or anyone else, there'll be a trail. Men like him always think they're too smart to get caught, so they get sloppy." Jake felt some of the tension ease from his shoulders. Carol believed him. That was half the battle. "There's one more thing," Carol said, her tone careful. "If this goes to trial, Whitfield's defense team will crucify Emma's credibility. Runaway, troubled home. No family support. They'll paint her as a liar looking for attention or a payout. Then we make sure the evidence is so overwhelming that her testimony is just confirmation," Jake replied. "DNA doesn't lie. Medical records don't lie. And I'm betting Emma isn't his only victim." Carol's eyes widened. Slightly. "You think there are others?" "Men like Whitfield don't start with attempted murder. They escalate. There are other girls. We just have to find them. That could take weeks. Then we better get started." A knock at the door interrupted them. Deputy Foster poked his head in. "Sergeant Officer Morrison, we've got a problem." Jake's hand instinctively moved toward his sidearm. "What kind of problem?" "Pastor Whitfield is here. He's at the front desk, asking to speak with whoever's in charge of last night's patrol on Highway 89. Jake and Carol exchanged glances. "He's checking to see if anyone found her," Jake said quietly. Carol stood, straightening her uniform. "Then let's see what story he tells." They walked to the front desk together. Through the glass partition, Jake could see Pastor Marcus Whitfield standing in the lobby, the picture of concerned citizen. He wore dark slacks and a gray sweater under a wool coat, his silver hair perfectly styled. His face carried an expression of practiced worry. Carol pushed through the door, Jake and Ranger following close behind. "Pastor Whitfield," Carol greeted warmly, her professional mask flawless. "What brings you by this morning?" Marcus turned, his smile broad and genuine. Up close, Jake could see the lines around his eyes, the kind that came from decades of smiling for cameras and congregations. But his eyes were cold, empty. "Sergeant Stevens, good morning. I'm sorry to bother you so early, but I'm concerned about one of our ministry's youth, a troubled young woman named Emma Clark. She's been staying at our church's shelter program, and she disappeared yesterday before the storm hit." "I see," Carol said neutrally. "And you're reporting her missing?" Well, not officially. Not yet. Marcus's expression turned pained, the perfect imitation of a man struggling with difficult emotions. Emma has issues. She's run away from several homes before ending up with us. I'm worried she might have tried to leave town during the storm and gotten caught somewhere. Why would she leave? Jake asked, his tone carefully neutral. Marcus turned toward him, and for just a fraction of a second, something flickered across his face. Recognition? Calculation? Then it was gone, replaced by pastoral concern. Officer? Morrison. Jake Morrison. Officer Morrison. Emma is a deeply troubled soul. She has a history of making poor decisions. False accusations against previous caregivers. I tried to help her. Truly I did. But some people, he trailed off, shaking his head sadly. Some people can't be helped. Jake's hands clenched into fists, but his expression remained neutral. False accusations? I hate to speak ill of someone who's clearly suffering, but yes. Emma has accused multiple men of impropriety in the past. It's a pattern. A cry for attention, I believe. The psychologist we consulted suggested it stems from her troubled childhood. I see, Jake said, his voice flat. And you think she might be out in the storm somewhere? I pray not, Marcus said, his voice heavy with false concern. But if she is, I hope you find her before it's too late. I'd hate to think of that poor girl freezing somewhere because she made another impulsive decision. Carol made a note on her pad. We'll keep an eye out, Pastor. If we find her, we'll let you know immediately. Thank you, Sergeant. You're doing God's work. Marcus's smile was beatific. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, one more thing. If you do find Emma, please be gentle with her. She's fragile, easily confused. Whatever story she tells you, take it with a grain of salt. Her grasp on reality is tenuous at best. We'll keep that in mind, Jake said, his voice like ice. Marcus nodded, gave them one more warm smile, and left. The moment the door closed behind him, Jake turned to Carol. He's establishing a narrative, discrediting Emma before we even reveal she's alive. He's good, Carol admitted grimly. That performance would convince a jury. Not if we have evidence that contradicts every word he just said. Jake watched through the window as Marcus walked to his car, a pristine black Mercedes. He came here to confirm Emma was dead. When we didn't give him any information, he planted seeds of doubt about her credibility. Classic manipulation. What's our next move? I'm going back to the hospital. I want to be there when Emma wakes up fully. We need a complete statement, every detail she can remember. And I want to know about these other accusations Marcus mentioned. You think they were real? I think Marcus Whitfield has been doing this for years, and every time someone got close to exposing him, he destroyed their credibility first. Carol nodded. I'll start pulling files on any complaints filed against him, even if they were dismissed. And I'll reach out to social services, see if there are other girls who went through his program. Be discreet. If he finds out we're investigating, I know how to do my job, Morrison, Carol said, but there was no heat in her words. You focus on keeping that girl alive. I'll focus on building a case that even Judge Patterson can't ignore. Jake headed for the door, Ranger at his heels. As he reached for the handle, Carol called out, Jake? He turned. Get him. Get him for every girl he's hurt. Make it count. Jake's smile was cold and dangerous. I intend to. The drive back to Pine Ridge Medical was tense. Jake's mind raced, connecting dots, anticipating Whitfield's next move. The pastor had shown his hand by coming to the station. He was worried. Good. Worried men made mistakes. When Jake arrived at the hospital, Deputy Foster was still at his post outside Emma's room, alert and professional. Anything? Jake asked. One nurse checked vitals an hour ago. Other than that, quiet, Dr. Reeves said, the girls resting comfortably. Good, stay sharp. Whitfield knows she's missing. He might try to locate her. Ryan's expression hardened. He won't get past me, sir. Jake believed him. He entered Emma's room quietly. The girl was awake, staring at the ceiling. Ranger immediately moved to her bedside, tail wagging gently. "Hey," Jake said softly. Emma turned toward him, and he saw the fear still present in her eyes, but also something else. Determination. "Did you talk to him?" she asked. "He came to the station this morning, wanted to report you missing." Emma's laugh was bitter. "Of course he did." Covering his tracks. "He said you have a history of making false accusations." Pain flickered across her face. "He told everyone that about Sarah, too." Jake's attention sharpened. "Sarah?" "Sarah Mitchell. She was there before me. Pregnant, too. She tried to tell someone what Marcus was doing, and he destroyed her. Said she was mentally ill, drug addict, had her committed to a psychiatric facility." Emma's hands clenched the sheets. "I saw her once, after. She looked empty, like he'd killed everything inside her." Jake pulled out his notebook. "Do you know where Sarah is now?" "Last I heard, she was in Cedarview." "The State Psychiatric Hospital. What happened to her baby?" Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. "She lost it. They said it was a miscarriage, but Sarah told me Marcus gave her something. Tea that made her sick. She started bleeding, and—" Emma couldn't finish. Jake's hand tightened around his pen, the plastic creaking. "Are there others?" "At least 3 that I know of. Rachel Gomez, Amy Chen, Jessica Porter, all runaways, all pregnant, all discredited or disappeared. Emma, this is important. Do you know where any of them are now?" She shook her head. "Rachel went back to California. Amy, I don't know. Jessica died. They said it was suicide, but you don't believe it." "No." Emma's voice was firm. "Jessica was scared, but she wanted to keep her baby. She wouldn't have killed herself." Jake stood pacing the small room. This was bigger than one. Attempted murder. This was a pattern, a predator who'd been operating unchecked for years, protected by his position and the community's blind faith. "Emma, I need you to tell me everything you remember. Dates, times, conversations, anything that can help us prove what Marcus did to you and these other girls." Emma nodded. "I'll tell you everything. But Officer Morrison?" "Jake. Just Jake." "Jake. When this goes to trial, will I have to see him? Sit in the same room?" "Yes," Jake answered honestly. "But you won't be alone. I'll be there. And when you testify, you look at the jury, not at him. You tell your truth, and you let justice do the rest." "What if they don't believe me?" "They will, because we're going to find every shred of evidence, every girl he hurt, every lie he told, and we're going to bury him in his own sins." Emma's smile was small, but real. "My mom used to say God sees everything, that eventually everyone answers for their actions." "Your mom was right," Jake said. "And Pastor Whitfield's Judgment Day is coming." A knock at the door made both of them tense. Dr. Reeves entered, carrying a tablet. "Emma, how are you feeling?" "Tired, scared, but better." Ellen smiled warmly. "That's good. Your vitals are improving steadily. The baby's heartbeat is strong. If you continue recovering at this rate, we might be able to move you out of critical care by tomorrow." "What about her safety?" Jake asked. "That's why I'm here. We need to make a decision. Emma can't stay in this room indefinitely. Eventually, someone will notice, ask questions. We need a more permanent solution," Jake considered. "What about a safe house? Someplace off the grid where Whitfield can't find her. The department has a witness protection house on the outskirts of town," Carol said, appearing in the doorway. "Isolated, secure. We use it for domestic violence cases." "Will I be alone?" Emma asked, her voice small. "No," Jake said firmly. "I'll arrange for round-the-clock protection, and I'll visit daily. Can Rangers stay?" Emma looked at the Malinois, who had his head resting on the edge of her bed. Jake smiled. "If it makes you feel safer, he can stay as much as regulations allow." Emma's expression softened, the first genuine peace Jake had seen on her face. "Thank you, all of you." Ellen placed a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder. "You're very brave, Emma. What you're doing, standing up to someone in power, it takes incredible courage." "I'm not brave," Emma whispered. I'm just tired of running." "Then rest," Jake said. "We'll handle everything else." As the sun climbed higher, burning away the last remnants of the storm, Jake stood at the hospital window, watching Pine Ridge wake up. Somewhere in this town, Pastor Marcus Whitfield was going about his day, confident in his immunity, preparing sermons, counseling parishioners, playing the part of righteous shepherd. But wolves couldn't hide forever, and Jake Morrison had spent 3 tours in Afghanistan hunting predators. This one would be no different. The next 48 hours moved with calculated precision. While Emma recovered under heavy guard, Carol and Jake worked in tandem, building a case that would withstand any defense attorney's assault. Carol's financial investigation revealed the first crack in Whitfield's facade. Over the past 5 years, he'd made regular wire transfers to accounts in 3 different states. Amounts ranging from $500 to $2,000, always marked as charitable donations. But the accounts belonged to young women with no apparent connection to his church. "Hush money," Carol said, spreading printouts across her desk. "He's been paying off victims to keep them quiet." Jake studied the names. "Can we trace these women?" "Already on it. 2 are in California, 1 in Arizona. I've contacted local authorities. They're reaching out." "What about the psychiatric hospital? Sarah Mitchell?" Carol's expression darkened. "Cedarview confirms she's a patient. Has been for 8 months. Diagnosed with paranoid delusions and severe depression." But Jake, her admission papers were signed by Marcus Whitfield as her spiritual guardian. He had her committed. Jake's jaw clenched. "We need to talk to her. She's under heavy medication. The director said she barely speaks, but I got us a meeting tomorrow." "Good. What about the medical examiner's report on Jessica Porter?" Carol pulled another file. "Officially ruled suicide. Single gunshot wound to the head, but there are inconsistencies. The angle of entry doesn't match a self-inflicted wound. Powder burns are absent. And Jessica was right-handed, but the gun was found in her left hand." "Someone staged it," Jake said quietly. "That's my read. But the investigation was cursory at best. Closed within a week." "Who was the lead investigator?" Carol hesitated. "Lieutenant David Foster, Ryan Foster's uncle." Jake's head snapped up. "Foster's uncle was on the case?" "David retired 6 months after Jessica's death. Moved to Florida." "But Jake," Carol's voice dropped, "David's been a member of Whitfield's congregation for 20 years. The pieces were falling into place. Whitfield didn't just have community respect, he had protection. Officers, officials, people in positions of power who either turned blind eyes or actively covered for him. "We need to reopen Jessica's case," Jake said. "Get her body exhumed. Do a proper forensic analysis. That requires a court order. Then let's get one." "What about the rape kit from Emma?" "Results came back this morning." Carol slid the report across the desk. "Evidence consistent with sexual assault, multiple occasions over several months. DNA sample collected. Once the baby's born, we'll have paternity confirmation." Jake stood, pacing. "We're building the case, but we need more. We need victim testimony beyond Emma. We need to break his wall of protection." "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking we need to find the other girls. Rachel, Amy, get them on record. Show this is a pattern, not an isolated incident. And if they won't talk? If Whitfield scared them into silence, then we make them understand they're not alone anymore. That Emma's standing up, and they can too." Carol leaned back in her chair, studying Jake with the analytical gaze of someone who'd seen too many cases fall apart. "You know this could destroy you, right? Going after Whitfield. He's got resources, lawyers. By the time this is over, they'll have dug into every corner of your life. Afghanistan, your wife's death, every decision you've made." Jake's expression didn't change. "Let them look. I've got nothing to hide. You're a good cop, Jake. Don't let this case consume you." "Too late," Jake said simply. "The moment I pulled that girl from the snow, this became personal." A knock interrupted them. Deputy Foster entered, looking uncomfortable. "Sir, there's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent." Who? A woman named Margaret Ellis. She says she's Emma Clark's mother. Jake and Carol exchanged surprised glances. Send her in. The woman who entered was in her early 42s, thin and weathered, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. She wore a faded jacket and clutched a worn purse like a lifeline. "Are you Officer Morrison?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "I am." "You're Emma's mother?" Margaret nodded, tears already forming. "I saw the news. They said an unidentified girl was found in the snow. I had a feeling." "Is it Emma? Is my daughter alive?" Jake gestured to a chair. "Mrs. Ellis, please sit down." "Is she alive?" Margaret's voice broke on the last word. "Yes." "Emma is alive and recovering at Pine Ridge Medical." Margaret collapsed into the chair, her body shaking with sobs. "Oh, thank God, I thought. When she ran away, I thought I'd never see her again. And then the news, I thought she was dead." Carol handed her a box of tissues, her expression sympathetic. "Mrs. Ellis, we need to ask you some questions about Emma's home situation." Margaret wiped her eyes, nodding. "I know what you're going to ask. About my husband, about why Emma ran." "Was he abusive?" Jake asked directly. "Yes." The word came out barely above a whisper. "Rick. He's my second husband. Emma's stepdad. I thought he was a good man. I thought we'd finally have a stable family. But She couldn't continue. "Did he hurt Emma?" Margaret's tears fell faster. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Emma never said anything. She just got quieter, more withdrawn. And then one day, she was just gone. Left a note saying she couldn't stay anymore, that she had to leave or something bad would happen." "Did you report her missing?" "Of course. But the police said she was a runaway, that she'd probably come back when she ran out of money. They didn't look for her. They just gave up." Jake's jaw tightened. More failures. More people who should have protected Emma and didn't. "Mrs. Ellis, Emma's pregnant. Did you know?" Margaret's face went white. "What? No. How far along?" "Nearly 9 months." "Oh my God." Margaret's hands covered her mouth. "My baby, my little girl. Who's the father?" Jake and Carol exchanged glances. "We're still investigating, but Emma's safe now. She's under protection." "Can I see her? Please." "I need to see my daughter." Jake considered carefully. "Mrs. Ellis, before we allow that, I need to ask you something. Where's your husband now?" "Home. He doesn't know I'm here." "Does he know Emma's been found?" "No one knows." "I came as soon as I saw the news." "Why?" "Because Emma's life may still be in danger. We're keeping her location confidential for her protection. If I allow you to see her, I need to know that you won't tell anyone where she is. Not your husband. Not friends. No one." Margaret's expression hardened with a determination Jake hadn't expected. "Rick and I are done. I'm filing for divorce. He's the reason Emma ran away, and I'll never forgive him for that. Whatever you need to keep my daughter safe, I'll do it." Jake nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll take you to her. But she's been through significant trauma, both physical and emotional. She needs support, not pressure." "I understand." They drove to the hospital in Jake's patrol SUV, Ranger in the back, Margaret silent beside him. When they arrived at Emma's room, Jake knocked gently before entering. Emma was sitting up in bed, eating hospital jello, with the enthusiasm of someone who'd been too close to death to take food for granted. When she saw her mother, the spoon clattered to the tray. "Mom?" "Emma." Margaret rushed forward, and mother and daughter collapsed into each other's arms, both crying. Jake stepped out, giving them privacy. Ranger followed, settling beside him in the hallway. Through the door, he could hear fragments of conversation. Apologies, forgiveness, love that had survived separation and pain. Carol appeared, holding a file. "We got confirmation. Rachel Gomez is willing to testify. She's flying in from California tomorrow. And Amy? Still trying to locate her." But Jake, Rachel's story matches Emma's almost exactly. Runaway teen, Whitfield's shelter program. Sexual abuse under the guise of spiritual guidance. Pregnancy. When she threatened to tell her social worker, Whitfield arranged for her to be transferred to a group home out of state. Paid her $1,000 to keep quiet. He's done this at least 4 times that we know of, Jake said, anger simmering in his chest. How many others didn't survive? How many disappeared before Emma? We may never know, but what we do know is enough to bring charges. Rape, sexual assault of a minor, attempted murder. I've briefed the DA. She's preparing arrest warrants. When? Sunday, after his morning service. We'll take him in front of his entire congregation. Jake smiled grimly. Poetic justice. There's one more thing. Carol's expression turned serious. Judge Patterson is trying to block the warrants. He's claiming insufficient evidence. Says Emma's testimony alone isn't enough, and Rachel's accusations are too old to be credible. Patterson goes to Whitfield's church. I know, but the DA is pushing back. She's taking it to a different judge, someone outside Whitfield's circle of influence. Good. We can't let him block this. The door opened. Margaret emerged, her eyes red but her expression lighter. She's asking for you. Jake entered the room. Emma looked exhausted but peaceful, her mother holding her hand. Jake, Emma said softly, I told my mom everything about Pastor Whitfield, about the baby, about what he did. Margaret's face was set in hard lines. I want to press charges. Whatever it takes to put that monster away. We're working on it, Jake assured her. But Emma, I need to prepare you. This is going to be difficult. Whitfield's lawyers will try to discredit you. They'll bring up your history, your mother's husband, anything to make you look unreliable. I know, Emma said, but I'm not afraid anymore. He doesn't have power over me anymore. You're stronger than you know, Margaret said, squeezing her daughter's hand. Jake's phone buzzed. A text from Carol. Judge Martin approved the warrants. Move is set for Sunday morning, 10 a.m. He looked up at Emma. It's happening. Sunday morning, we're arresting Pastor Whitfield. Emma's eyes widened. During his service? Yes, in front of his congregation. In front of everyone who enabled him. For the first time since Jake had found her, Emma smiled. Really smiled. Good. Let them all see what he really is. Sunday morning arrived with crisp winter sunshine, the kind of morning that made Pine Ridge look like a postcard. The Church of Eternal Grace stood on a hill overlooking the town, its white steeple piercing the blue sky, stained glass windows glowing with colored light. Cars filled the parking lot, families in Sunday clothes, streamed toward the entrance, Bibles in hand, smiles on faces. They had no idea their world was about to shatter. Jake sat in an unmarked car 2 blocks away, watching through binoculars. Beside him, Carol checked her weapon. In the back seat, Ranger sat alert, sensing the tension. 3 units in position, Carol said, listening to the radio. Exits are covered. DA's inside with a court officer. Whitfield? Just arrived. Shaking hands, playing the beloved pastor. Jake's grip tightened on the binoculars. Through the lens, he could see Marcus Whitfield standing at the church entrance, greeting his flock. That same warm smile, that same false compassion. Let's move, Jake said. They drove to the church, parking directly in front. As Jake and Carol walked up the steps, conversations died. People stared. The sight of police at a church on Sunday morning was never a good sign. Jake pushed through the doors. The sanctuary was packed, hundreds of people filling the pews. At the front, Whitfield stood behind the pulpit, mid-sermon. And God calls us to be shepherds to the lost, to guide those who have strayed from the path. He stopped when he saw Jake and Carol walking down the center aisle. His expression flickered, confusion giving way to something darker. Officers, he said, his voice carrying that same pastoral warmth. Is there an emergency? Jake reached the front, every eye in the church on him. Ranger flanked him, a silent promise of force if needed. Pastor Marcus Whitfield, Jake said, his voice clear and authoritative. You're under arrest for sexual assault of a minor, rape, attempted murder, and conspiracy to commit murder. The church erupted. Gasps. Shouts. Someone screamed. Whitfield's mask cracked. "This is absurd. I've done nothing." "You have the right to remain silent," Carol continued, pulling out handcuffs. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. I demand to know who's accusing me." Whitfield's voice rose, anger breaking through. "This is a persecution, an attack on my ministry." Jake stepped closer, his voice low enough that only Whitfield could hear. "Emma Clark, Sarah Mitchell, Rachel Gomez, Amy Chen, Jessica Porter. Those are just the ones we know about. How many others, Marcus? How many girls did you destroy?" Whitfield's face went pale. "You're going to pay for every single one," Jake said. "And there's nowhere left to hide." Carol snapped the cuffs on, the metallic click echoing through the stunned silence. As they led Whitfield down the aisle, his congregation parted like the Red Sea. Some faces showed shock, others slowly dawning realization. And a few, Jake noticed, showed relief, as if a weight they'd been carrying in secret had finally been lifted. Outside, news cameras had already arrived. Reporters shouted questions. Whitfield's face would be on every screen by evening. "No comment," Carol said firmly, guiding Whitfield into the patrol car. Jake watched as they drove away, Whitfield's head visible through the rear window. The man who'd thought himself untouchable, brought down by the same system he'd manipulated for years. Ranger pressed against Jake's leg, and he reached down to scratch the dog's ears. "Justice," Jake murmured. "That's what this feels like." The trial began 6 weeks later. By then, Emma had given birth to a healthy baby girl she named Hope. The DNA test confirmed what everyone already knew. Marcus Whitfield was the father. Rachel Gomez flew in from California and testified. Sarah Mitchell, heavily medicated but lucid, told her story. Amy Chen, located in Arizona, added her voice. And Emma, holding baby Hope in her arms, faced the man who'd tried to kill her and spoke her truth. The jury deliberated for 3 hours, guilty on all counts. Marcus Whitfield was sentenced to 40 years in prison without possibility of parole. 6 months later, Emma stood in the town square with baby Hope in her arms, her mother beside her. A small ceremony was taking place. Mayor Linda Patterson, no relation to the judge who'd tried to block the warrants, stepped up to the microphone. "Today we honor 2 heroes, Officer Jake Morrison and K-9 Ranger, whose actions saved 2 lives and brought a predator to justice." Jake stood uncomfortably in his dress uniform as the mayor pinned a medal to his chest. Ranger sat beside him, tail wagging, a matching medal on his collar. Officer Morrison's dedication and courage remind us that true strength lies in protecting the vulnerable. His actions didn't just save Emma Clark's life, they gave voice to victims who thought they'd never be heard. Applause filled the square. Jake's eyes found Emma's in the crowd. She smiled, tears streaming down her face, and mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Jake nodded, feeling something settle in his chest. Peace. The kind he'd been searching for since leaving the military. That evening, Jake sat on his porch, Ranger at his feet, watching the sunset over Pine Ridge. His phone buzzed. A text from Emma. Hope said her first word today. "Want to guess what it was?" Jake smiled and typed back. "What?" "Ranger." She said Ranger. Jake laughed, reaching down to ruffle his partner's fur. "Hear that, boy? You're somebody's first word. You're famous." Ranger's tail thumped against the porch, and he let out a contented sigh. In the distance, church bells rang, calling the faithful to evening service. But the Church of Eternal Grace stood empty now, its doors locked, its congregation scattered to other parishes. Pine Ridge was healing, slowly, painfully, but healing. And in the house on Oak Street, a teenage mother held her daughter close and whispered stories about the officer and his dog who'd refused to let darkness win. Sometimes miracles don't announce themselves with thunder and trumpets. Sometimes they arrive in the form of a K-9's bark in a snowstorm, a police officer who won't look away, and a girl who finds the courage to speak truth, to power. God's grace doesn't always look like what we expect. Sometimes it looks like justice. Sometimes it looks like a second chance. And sometimes it looks like a Belgian Malinois named Ranger, whose keen senses and loyal heart saw what human eyes had missed. 2 years had passed since that winter night when Ranger's bark had pierced through the storm. The seasons had cycled twice, snow melting into spring, summer burning into autumn, and winter returning with its quiet benediction. Emma Clark stood in the doorway of her small apartment, watching as Hope toddled across the living room, her chubby legs still uncertain but determined. The little girl had her mother's hazel eyes and dark hair, but thankfully nothing else of her father. She was pure innocence, untouched by the darkness that had preceded her birth. Ranger. Hope squealed, pointing at the photograph on the wall. It showed Jake Morrison in his dress uniform, Ranger sitting proudly beside him, both wearing their medals of valor. "That's right, baby," Emma said softly, scooping her daughter into her arms. "Ranger saved us. Him and Officer Jake." A knock at the door made Emma tense instinctively, a habit born from months of looking over her shoulder. But through the peephole, she saw Jake's familiar face, and the tension melted away. She opened the door. Jake stood there in civilian clothes, jeans and a warm jacket, Ranger at his side. The dog's tail began wagging immediately when he saw Hope. "Hope!" the little girl cried, reaching for the Belgian Malinois. Jake laughed. "She still can't quite get his name right, huh?" "She's working on it," Emma said, smiling. "Come in." "I just made coffee." They settled in the small living room, Hope immediately crawling over to Ranger, who lay down patiently as the toddler patted his head with gentle, clumsy affection. The dog had been trained for combat and pursuit, but with Hope he was impossibly gentle. "How are you doing?" Jake asked, accepting the steaming mug Emma offered. "Good, really good, actually." Emma sat across from him, tucking her legs beneath her. "I started online classes last month. I'm going to be a social worker. Help kids like me." Jake's smile was genuine and proud. "That's incredible, Emma. Those kids are going to be lucky to have you." "I figured if I survived everything that happened, I should use it for something. Help other girls who think no one will believe them." "They'll believe you," Jake said quietly. "You're living proof that speaking up matters." Emma's eyes grew misty. "I got a letter last week from a girl in Ohio. She saw the news coverage of Whitfield's trial. She said it gave her courage to report her youth pastor. They arrested him because of her testimony." Jake set down his coffee, his expression serious. "Emma, do you understand what you've done? You didn't just save yourself. You started a wave. Other victims are finding their voices because you found yours first. I couldn't have done it without you," Emma said, her voice catching. "Without Ranger, if you hadn't found me that night." "But I did," Jake interrupted gently, "and you survived. And now you're thriving. That's what matters." Hope toddled over to Emma, clutching Ranger's collar, trying to pull the patient dog along. "Mama, Hope play." Emma laughed, wiping her eyes. "Yes, baby. Hope gets to play." She looked at Jake, and in that moment, they both understood the profound truth of that simple statement. Hope got to play. Hope got to live. Hope got to be. And that made everything worth it. Outside, the first snowflakes of winter began to fall, soft and gentle, nothing like the storm that had tried to bury them all those months ago. This snow was different. This snow was a promise. That darkness doesn't last forever. That justice is real. That courage is contagious. And that sometimes God's greatest miracles come wrapped in the smallest, most unexpected packages. Like a dog's bark in a blizzard, like a baby's first word, like hope itself, refusing to die in the cold. Emma Clark's story reminds us that no one is beyond saving, and no predator is beyond judgment. That faith isn't passive hope, but active courage, and that every voice matters, even when the world tries to silence it. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that darkness never has the final word. Comment Amen if you believe that God still works through ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary justice. and subscribe to our channel for more stories of faith, courage, and redemption. May God bless you, protect the vulnerable, and grant courage to those who fight for justice. Remember, you are never alone, and your voice has power. Use it.